And here he is with the intro to our next guest.
From renting a friend to choosing a stay in prison, human beings will go quite far to avoid loneliness. Her new book, The Lonely Century, is out tomorrow, and she's here to explain that if you are the owner of a lonely heart, you are not alone. Please welcome the one, the only, and not so lonely, Noreena Hertz.
Beautiful intro. That was nice, wasn't it?
That was really charming.
It was really charming. And also, again, it was quite informative, wasn't it? Because he's nailed it, hasn't he, within the intro there?
Yeah, totally nailed it. Because I went round the world investigating why this is the lonely century. Because, of course, even before the coronavirus struck, we were really lonely. 2 in 5 elderly people in the UK, their main form of company was their TV. This is before the coronavirus. And 3 in 5 18 to 25-year-olds were lonely often or always. So I went around the world kind of trying to dig into why this was. And one of the things I did, as he said in my intro, was I rented a friend. It turns out, I never knew this, it turns out that there is a website, rentafriend.com, and it has 600,000 friends to rent. This is all over the world. And I was in Manhattan and I rented Brittany. I went and met her at this kind of rather shishi cafe downtown. Attractive, 23 years old, college grad. She comes, we meet. I'm a bit nervous because I'm thinking, what's the deal here? Is this something untoward? No, not at all. Literally, for 3 hours, Brittany was my friend, and we wandered around and we drank coffee together, and we went into a bookstore and we went into Urban Outfitters and tried on hats. And at times, and the weird thing was that at times I kind of forgot that I was paying for her until at the end of our 3 hours. We're in Urban Outfitters and she goes, okay, time's up, that'll be $120, please. And it's a strange story, but it's I think it's just so symptomatic of this bigger issue that so many of us, young as well as old, are really lonely. Yeah, I mean, that's a very strange take on what's going on at the moment, but why it's useful is because it distills how extreme the situation has become. Because obviously if you can't afford to rent a friend or you don't like the idea of it, and it just sounds bonkers actually, from 10,000 feet. But if that's what it's got to, obviously that's how bad the problem is, and that's in the Western world. And that's for somebody, who isn't old or, isn't single or isn't widowed or whatever. Your book, The Lonely Century, you've already identified, this is what struck me about it, you've already identified this century as the lonely century, even though it's only 20 years old. And I'm thinking, how do you know? Are you so certain that this is going to continue and carry on to be the lonely century? Well, my hope is that it doesn't continue. Right. And that's really, and that's in a way up to us, because it's lonely because of a number of factors. Our smartphones, of course, are part of the problem because we're not present with each other and our heads are in our phones, but also the migration to cities, more and more people living lonely amongst other people, rushing around, go, go, go. It was really interesting facts that I found in my book. The wealthier a city, the faster people walk, and also the denser a city, the less civil they are to each other. So we're living in this urbanized world, in a world of technology, in a world in which we're doing more and more of our stuff online. So we're not going to bookstores, we're eating at home on Deliveroo rather than going to cafes. All of this before the coronavirus, and of course that just ramping it all up massively. But there's so much we can do to fix it. And so the message of my book is really, we've built a lonely world, but there's so much we can do. And some of it is so simple. Put down our phones. There's research that shows that even if a couple are sitting at a table and they've got a smartphone between them, even if the smartphone isn't turned on, they feel less connected to each other and less empathetic. Yeah. So, put down our phones, be present with each other, but also engage more, support our local communities. That's so much more important now than ever. And I think what this virus has done for so many of us is it's made us realise how important our local communities are. So do shop locally and do things. Go show up at your local community centre or a community event and support it. But also be kinder to each other. Be
say thank you more, smile more. I know it's a bit hard when you've got a mask on, and I've noticed, people are really making an effort to move their heads more. Have you noticed?
Yeah, totally.
To just kind of
smile with your eyes.
Yeah, smize.
Is that what they call it? Is it called the smize?
Okay, this is from my watching of way back when America's Top Model, where Tyra Banks talks about smize.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Bring on the smize. Loving the smize.
Yeah, but it's quite hard to. It's quite an art to smize. But I've noticed that I'm really moving my head more and actually saying, "Oh, hello," when you walk past someone in the street, and also we got to get better at, thinking who might be lonely around us.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so pleased that you invited me on today, and to have your support for these ideas in this book, because so many people feel lonely, and it's quite a small thing to do, to just think who might be lonely in my circle, and actually reach out to them, even if it's just sending a text. But ideally, pick up the phone, or even better, if you'll see an elderly person sitting on a bench on their own, chat to them, say hi.
And it's so easy, and there are tricks, and I do it all the time. If somebody's got a bike and they've lent their bike up against the bench, and I go, is that a mountain bike? Is that an off-road bike? Or you just have a look at, just like you might be interested. Nothing threatening, nothing personal.
Yes.
And you can strike up a conversation. And do you know what? It's 10 out of 10 strike rate for me. Nobody sort of shies away from that, because that's why they're there. That's why they're in the park. That's why they're sitting on the bench. They want to get out there. Obviously you don't encroach on people's private time, but you can sort of sense that anyway. You talk about the helpers high. I love the helpers high. We'll get into that in a second or two. You talk about the helpers high, and also you talk about people giving people the time of day. And pre-COVID, I know a lot of the book was written pre-COVID, and you say that a lot of these issues have been magnified by what's gone on in COVID, with COVID, via COVID. But from a city point of view, lots more people are working at home. Yeah. Lots more cities are less dense. Half of the job that you talk about having to do in this book seems to be sort of being done for us now, and almost like to give us a more than a standing start, a little sort of shove off the line, if you like. And I do think that people, because they've got more time on their hands, we get guests on the show now, right? Actors, who used to look at their watch during an interview, because it's one of 20 that day. We can't get them off the phone now, because they're at home, they've got nothing to do, and they're giving us more of their time. So give people the time of day. It immediately helps you feel better. There's science behind that. You can get onto that in a second or two. And their helpers high. Tell us about both of those things.
Yeah, so first, you're absolutely right. Micro exchanges, that hello that we say in the cafe to the barista, the nod that we give to our greengrocer, the how are you to our postman, all these micro exchanges actually make us feel so much happier and so much more connected to each other. And I think that's one of the things that's been so hard recently, is that we've been deprived so many of those interactions that actually make us feel more connected, because we're creatures of togetherness, essentially. We've been hardwired to connect. And you asked about the helpers high. Well, it turns out that being kind to someone, helping them, actually is really good for our health. So when they did studies where they measured cortisol, which is the stress hormone in people, in your saliva, you can measure it quite easily, and they measured cortisol levels when people volunteered, for example, and they measured it before and after, they saw that cortisol levels fell dramatically. Whereas being lonely, and that's something that isn't really talked about much, isn't just a mental health issue, it's also really bad for our health physically. Because when we're lonely, our blood pressure goes up, our stress levels go up.
Hypertension.
Yeah, exactly, goes up. And smoking, loneliness is actually as bad for us as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Yeah, let's not do that then. And the thing about cortisol levels is a lot of us are so used to our cortisol levels being high, we've now sort of naturalized to them, and we think that's our usual state. So if you can do something to bring them down, what you then notice is a difference. And you realize that there is a difference between what's good for you and what's bad for you. And if you don't get that separation, you can be sort of deluded into the fact that this is how you're supposed to be. And once you can see the light of day, you want more of it, which is extraordinarily useful.
Yeah, and our phones, of course, are another thing which create these physical sensations, this craving, this addiction to our phones. And, you know, the book's about much more than technology, but one of the things that came across throughout my research was just how detrimental us being on our phones are, not only for our partners, you know, and we've all done it, been in bed scrolling on our phones, not paying attention to our partner. I confess I do it at times too. But also sad research really about how this affects children. And when parents are on their phone distracted the whole time, research has shown that their children tend to be more anxious, more depressed, and even have things like higher incidences of eating disorders. So some of the things that we're doing because we're compelled to do
and we've normalised it as
yes.
well. Normalised this ridiculous behaviour.
Yeah, exactly.
When I'm at the park and the playground, because I do, there's lots of different daddies now. So I'm Daddy Swings. That's one of my incarnations, apparently. So from 9 o'clock, it's Daddy Swings. My wife says she thinks it's
who gets to be Daddy Slides.
I'm Daddy Swings, Daddy Slim, Daddy Swims, Daddy Swings, Daddy. It's Daddy. It's very. My wife thinks it's a very funny joke. When it's my turn to do the dad thing, it's Daddy this, Daddy that. And at 8:15 on a Saturday, she says, "Daddy Swings, everyone," and that means she's got 2 hours off, basically, which she more than deserves. But she more than makes the most of rubbing it in. But I love it. So when I go to the playground, I see a lot of dads and mums doing the same thing, right? And I see lots of mums and dads engaging. But you're talking about the fact that our kids are missing out on us, even though we're present because we're looking at our phones.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. The mums and dads are missing out on the experience of being there. Turn it right round.
Yeah, 100%.
So there was a young dad in the park on Sunday, and he was on the phone. His daughter was on at the top of the slide, waiting for dad to just watch her. Right, and it was so sad. It was really sad, you know. And he was on the phone, and I couldn't help. I just got a bit closer, and I thought, I bet he's talking about work. And he was talking about work, and he was, you know, he'd done the dad thing. You know, it was his turn, or he wanted to do it, or whatever, or he's single parent. I don't know what the story was. And he'd gone to the park with his daughter, and he'd ticked the box. He was doing the right thing, but he wasn't there. It might as well have been somebody else, a grandparent or a childminder, or engaging more with the child. And I just thought, oh no, you've done all the heavy lifting, but you're not taking the bow. Take the bow.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting what you're saying. I totally agree. And the fathers in the park on their phones. I mean, and I have to say, it does tend to be more of the fathers often where I see in the park on their phones. But I think it also raises the question of, if you're not going to do it, who else is going to be there for your child? And one of the fascinating things I looked at in my book was the rise of robots in being our friends and carers.
Because they might be better
supporters.
friends than people, better artificial friends that are present than real friends that aren't present.
Yeah, and that's the fascinating thing. And in Japan, where the take-up of robots, especially amongst the elderly, as friends and companions is the greatest, there you see like really moving stories of elderly women knitting bonnets even for their robots.
Oh no!
Yeah,
but yes.
But yes.
No, but yes.
But
oh my God!
But then, as you say, what are the ramifications for society if it's better to hang out with a robot, or you know, if we don't need each other?
My robot, it's like a dog. My dog listens more than my kids do, or my dog listens more than my mum and dad do.
Yeah, but then what kind of a society do we build if we choose to hang out with robots because they treat us better?
And you mentioned Japan. You also talked about really high reoffending rates among Japanese pensioners because they want to be in prison.
This is tragic. The
unbelievable
incarceration rate for elderly people in Japan has shot up in recent years, predominantly because women are doing small crimes like shoplifting in order to get jailed because they're so lonely, because their kids live far away, because no one's got time for them, that they're looking for the company and solace that they can find in a jail.
You're awesome, Noreena, and she's proper. She's a professor. She's written 5 books. I mean, she's a proper clever person. Now and again, they do come and join us, and here's another one. We've got to leave it there for now. And Noreena, you're very welcome back. Noreena Hertz has written this book. It's called The Lonely Century. And then the first chapter is called The Lonely Century. Then on the front cover of the book, it's called The Lonely Century, and underneath that, Coming Together in a World That's Pulling Us Apart. And the last chapter is called... I like that. Did you do that on purpose? Because the title of the book is the first chapter, and the sort of annotation on the cover of the book is the last chapter. That's very clever. Coming Together in a... But you are very clever. So condescending. Sorry. Can only apologise. She's a professor! She's been around the world. She does research. Sorry, Noreena. Sorry, Prof. I'm just a DJ. Can't you tell? Right. Anyway, it's very good. But it's out tomorrow.
It's out tomorrow.
Tomorrow, Noreena Hertz, The Lonely Century, coming together in a world that's pulling us apart. And that's the realism, but there is loads of optimism in there and loads of takeaways. Great. Lovely. Thank you so much. Blur now, song 2 on Virgin Radio.